Hello everyone, my name is Ranger Nicole, and today Ranger Zach, Ranger Kate, and myself are so excited to be sharing a little bit of Yellowstone with all of you. Now, if you have ever been to Yellowstone National Park before, can you give me some elk antlers? What if you have ever heard of Yellowstone National Park? Can you give me some snake hands? Now, if you ever explored a natural space like a county, state, or another national park, or even your backyard, can you give me some bison horns? Awesome! All of these natural spaces are unique and special for different reasons. So my first question to you is, why do you think Yellowstone National Park is special? Or why do you think this land was protected? For a little inspiration, we can take a look at my patch. For on the park ranger uniform, the patch represents all the different things that the National Park Service protects. I have a blown up image of my patch here. And we're going to play a little game of I Spy. So your first challenge is to find all of the 5 images on this symbol. Your next challenge is to think about why would we choose those images and how does the Park Service protect these different things? The first thing I see on this image is our bison, front and center. And that bison represents all the wildlife that call Yellowstone home. And we actually have the highest concentration of animals than anywhere else in the lower 48 states. We have this tree here, and the tree represents all of the plants in our national parks. And plants really help us out by producing a lot of oxygen, and they provide a food and shelter for other organisms. This lake down here represents all the natural resources like the clean air and water found in our parks. And the mountain represents all the really cool geology. Yellowstone has over 10,000 different hydrothermal features. And it also represents all the different recreation you can do with your family and friends, like hiking and camping. And lastly, our mountain represents all those big natural vistas that people want to see when they're hiking or driving through the park. This last image here is the outer edge of the symbol, and it is an arrowhead. And that's how we celebrate our cultural history here in the Park Service. At Yellowstone, humans have been living in this area for at least 11,000 years, and we still have 26 tribes today that are affiliated with our park. Now, our theme today is going to be looking at all the living things, like our bison and our tree, and our non-living, like our mountain and natural resources, and how they're all connected to form an ecosystem. Now, the physical environment here at Yellowstone is really large. Our park is over 2.2 million acres and is in 3 different states. Can you try to guess them now? If you guessed Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, then you would be correct. Now, all of that space makes up the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, which is one of the last and largest temperate zone ecosystems found on Earth. Now, Ranger Kate is going to keep on talking about all these different elements that make up our ecosystem.
All right, Ranger Nicole already talked to us about what ecology is and those living and non-living factors that are here in Yellowstone. And so we like to use some big words here that we're going to kind of share with you guys. And so our non-living factors here in Yellowstone we call abiotic, and our living factors we call biotic. And so both of these are things that you will hear me repeat over and over again while we are here talking about ecology within Yellowstone. And ecology and these abiotic and biotic factors within Yellowstone, they interact in different environments in the park, and they become part of an organism's habitat. So what is a habitat? Well, it's where species and organisms live, and they contain essentials for these organisms to survive. So can we think about a habitat that we are a part of or that we have at home? Probably. You guys all live in a home, hopefully, and you need these essential elements to survive. There's only 4 of them. I'm sure we think of a lot of other things that we need to survive, but these 4 essential ones make up a habitat. We're going to do a little song and dance to go with it, and you guys can make your own versions at home, but today we're going to kind of talk about those 4 elements in a really simple song and dance. So they start off with food, water, shelter, and space. So I want you guys to repeat after me and do the actions. So we have food, and we rub our bellies, and water comes down in the form of rain, or out here in Yellowstone, snow. We build a shelter to keep us safe, and we make sure we have a lot of space, because space makes a habitat a wonderful place. So you guys can keep repeating that one at home to remember what a habitat is. But to be able to live in these habitats, we all, including humans, have adapted to our environments. And an adaptation is something that allows for us to survive out here. Us being organisms, humans, animals, plants, and all of them are abiotic and biotic factors that interact together. And I can think of a few habitats out here that have animals adapting to live in them. So we have rivers and forests and streams, and all of these have essentials for these organisms to survive as long as they can adapt to it. So what does it mean to adapt? What is an adaptation? We're going to talk about both physical and behavioral adaptations, and these are a feature of an organism that helps them to find food, helps them find shelter, maybe helps them be in a space that they're supposed to be in, and helps them find water. So the two categories, again, that I mentioned are physical and behavioral. So our first physical adaptation that we will talk about is going to be camouflage. I bet some of you guys know animals that are camouflage. One of the popular ones out here that we talk about is a snowshoe hare. And so the photo on the top is a white snowshoe hare. What season do you think that they are using that fur camouflage in? Winter. So that way they can hide better in all the snow out here. And then on the bottom, they're a little bit more brown. They're kind of hiding now in those sagebrush areas that aren't covered in snow, maybe in the spring and the fall and the summer. So our snowshoe hare uses camouflage to adapt to their environment depending on the season. It's a pretty cool adaptation. And another one that we might talk about, there's a lot of snow to walk through out here, and so we have some animals like our moose, and they have very long legs because the snow out here can get pretty deep, and they need to be able to walk through the snow to find grasses and things to eat. And so our moose have these long legs that allow them to step over the snow and continue to walk out here in Yellowstone and move around to find the appropriate food and water and shelter, and maybe even the space that they need. And now I know we talked about a lot of living organisms out here and animals, and Ranger Nicole had mentioned earlier that we have a bison on our arrowhead. And so that's probably one of the most popular animals out here. Well, they adapt to winter pretty well out here. And if you guys haven't seen a bison in person, I'm going to get one for you. Ugh. So we have a bison skull. The size of my head, it's much bigger than my head, I think. I hope so. If I had a head this big, I don't know if my neck could hold it. So bison are very unique that they have such big heads and very strong necks. So that way then when they are walking around in the snow, they can dig their heads up to 3 feet deep to find the grasses to eat. So they are using these big strong heads to find food. It's pretty cool. That is a good physical adaptation. But we have other types of adaptations that allow for our animals to survive in their habitats, and these ones are a behavior that these animals practice. And it is learned, or maybe it's something that's instinctual, something that when they are born, they just know this is what they're supposed to do. And one of those ones that they just know they're supposed to do is migration. So if you come out in Yellowstone in the winter, you might only see some birds because others are going to migrate in the winter, maybe to a warmer place. They might head south and stay a little warmer. They're going to find their mate, and then they're going to come back to Yellowstone, and they're going to nest in the spring and the summer and spend their time out here. But they were born with that instinct to leave when it's not so ideal for them to find food, water, shelter, or space. Another animal that migrates are elk. And you might not think that they migrate because you see them all over Yellowstone, but they like to hang out in higher elevations, so up in those mountains. And when it gets snowy up there and they can't find food, they move further down the mountains to lower elevations so that way they can find more food. Can you guys think of any other behaviors that animals might have out here to survive in the winter or to survive during other seasons. One that I like to talk about, because I think I would like to do this personally in the winter, is hibernation. So we have lots of animals out here that will hibernate, and that means that they'll eat and eat and eat and get lots of food and big and fat, so that way they can survive the whole winter while taking a nap. So they're going to find a warm place to survive. They're going to take a very long sleep, and then they'll come out when the weather's warmer. There's more food available for them, and they can actually go out and find a safe habitat to live in. So as we continue on this journey that we're on of ecology, the abiotic are non-living factors part of these habitats, maybe your shelter or your space is non-living. And the biotic factors, they provide that food, water, and shelter and space. And with these environments, they all rely on each other. So they're all linked together. And we're going to continue that with Ranger Zach.
Hi guys, Ranger Zach here. Like Ranger Kate said, I'm going to be talking to you about the food web. And more specifically, I want to talk about the biotic or the living organisms within a food web and how they interact with each other. And if we think of a food web, if we think of a spider web, it's really a great analogy for what happens within the ecosystem. So each corner of the food web is a different animal or organism, and all the webbing in between is all those interactions and the complexity of how they all work together. Now, we can't understand all those interactions and complexities. Our brain just can't quite wrap around everything that's going on. So an easier way to think about it is more in a food chain, and we can think of what each role each animal has within the food chain and also the food web. So if you think of a food chain, what is at the very bottom of the food chain? Probably the most important thing. We often don't think about them a lot as being that important, but I'll show you. Here's a picture of a food chain, and down here at the bottom, we have the plants. And we call them the producers, because it's really where the energy starts transferring up the food chain. It's with these producers. Now, if we're moving up the food chain, what do you call an animal that only eats plants? It's called an herbivore. I like to think of it as it only likes herbs, which are plants. So that's a good way to remember it. And in order to be an herbivore, you need a special physical adaptation in order to eat that food. And that adaptation is in your mouth. So if you take your tongue and you move them back to your molars there, I want you to feel the top of your molars and see how they're flat. Those flat molars would allow these herbivores to eat the plants and chew up these plants. And we have a very iconic herbivore in the park, and it's this guy right here, and that's the plains bison. Oh, this head is heavy. And the plains bison has those teeth we were talking about. It's got the flat molars, a lot bigger than ours, but still the same, necessary for it to eat all the plants. Now, what is the next thing in a food chain? Something that eats both plants and animals. It's called an omnivore. And they're very opportunistic eaters because they can be. They have the mouth, the teeth, to be able to eat both plants and meat or animals. We're actually omnivores. I'm usually an omnivore. I like both. So it makes me very opportunistic and eat what's available. So let's look back at our food chain here. And we have a very iconic animal here that's an omnivore. You might think of him, can be kind of scary looking. And that's a grizzly bear. But they're really cool. So some of the things that make them omnivores and have that strong mouth are their teeth. They got both molars, premolars, canines, and incisors, making them able to eat anything that comes across their path. The other thing that grizzly bears also have is they have this crest right here. And that's where a lot of muscle attaches to their jaw. And you need a strong jaw when you're eating meat. Most animals that eat meat are going to have this crest here, and it makes their jaw stronger because the muscle's attached to it. So some really cool physical adaptations you have to have in order to be an omnivore. Now, if we're moving up the food chain, and we're thinking of an animal that only eats meat, do you know what that's called? Yeah, it's a carnivore. And we have a very iconic carnivore here in the park. And it was actually reintroduced in 1995 after it had been removed for almost 100 years. And that right here is the wolf. Now, wolves are really cool. They're going to have more the canines, and they're going to have the premolars, but they're not really going to have the flat molars like the other ones because they don't eat any of the plant species. They're specifically designed to only eat meat. And as you can see, they also have that big crest on there, so they have really strong jaws. So these carnivores, we can call them the apex predator or the tertiary consumer in the food chain, are very important. And when we removed them in about 100 years ago, what do you think are some of the problems that we had? What do they eat? Yeah, they eat a lot of the ungulates, the hoofed animals, the herbivores, the plant eaters. They're going to be eating a lot of those animals. And without the wolf, those animals started to spread and reproduce like crazy because they had no one eating them. And then what do the herbivores eat? They eat the grass, they eat the bushes, they eat the trees. So without the wolves eating the herbivores ate the grass, and they acted like big lawnmowers out there and ate everything pretty much flat. And the cascade effect of that was crazy. When you eat all the grass and all the small plants, they don't have a chance to grow. Birds like to use small bushes to hide in. The grasses keep the erosion together on the stream banks, so there's more erosion and that hurts the fish, and so forth and so on. And that really comes into the webbing of the spider web within a food web. All those little strings start breaking, and when the wolf was removed, we had this cascade of problems. So they brought the wolf back in 1995, and they ate some of the herbivores, and everything kind of started balancing itself out. And another thing a wolf does is it provides a lot of food for all the other animals. So wolves like to kill the elk, sometimes the bison, and here's a picture kind of represents like what's left after a kill and all the other animals that eat it. It's kind of a scary picture, but as you can see, there are so many other animals that will eat off a wolf kill, and they feed so many other animals, from the insects to the fox to the grizzly bear to coyotes to everything else that eats meat, and so on and so forth. So when you remove an animal, it really has cascade effects that we can't really understand sometimes until we see it start happening. So keeping an ecosystem healthy, keeping all the original animals there is really important. And we try to do that here at Yellowstone, as we have all the major mammals that were originally here before Euro-Americans were here, which is really cool. It's a really rare thing to have, and I hope you get a visit sometimes.
Hello again, it is now time for our Ranger Recap. Now today we learned about how the living and non-living things found here at the park are all connected to form an ecosystem, and how some of those organisms are even specially adapted to survive in the habitats found here at the park. Now those are just a few reasons why on March 1st in 1872, we decided that Yellowstone needed to be protected and preserved for all to enjoy. Now unfortunately, the Park Service did make a few management mistakes along the way, like getting rid of the wolf, one of our major apex predators. And we saw what type of unintended consequences that had on our ecosystem. Now, can you think of any management issues that could be going on today? Some of those issues are how the park is going to handle climate change, invasive species, or even an influx of park visitors. Now, luckily, park rangers are using the best scientific data and research and advice from all of our experts in the park to be the best stewards possible. Now, park visitors and people just like you can help us achieve that mission by learning and following all of the safety rules that you can before entering our parks, and also learning about our natural and cultural history, and sharing that knowledge and enthusiasm with other people around you. Now, your last challenge for today is to take all that you learned from this video and the other resources that you can find on the park and answer the question, Why do you think Yellowstone should still be protected? When you have that answer, I would love for you to share that with at least 3 other people that you can find in your own habitat. Well, team, on behalf of myself, Ranger Zach, and Ranger Kate, we just want to thank you very much for taking the time to learn about our nation's special outdoor places. And we want to leave you with our favorite ranger joke. Now, what did the dad bison say to his son on the first day of school? Bye, son. Well, thank you all again, and we hope to see you at Yellowstone National Park in the near future. And please remember to never stop asking questions and to never stop exploring. Have a great day.